So I wanted to finish the lecture with one of the ways that, dysfunctional culture can come from another culture, infect us, and then have people who look like us actually work to have us help the people who are trying to control us and keep us subordinate.
But now I want to talk to you a little bit about white privilege. Is that white privilege or is that like majority privilege? Is the same true? You go to China, you're Chinese. It's the same true if you're Chinese? Is it majority privilege? And if it's majority privilege, isn't that just part of living within your culture? So let's say you live in your culture, you're privileged as a member of that culture. Well, obviously, that's what the culture is for. That's what it's for. Why would you bother building the damn thing if it didn't accrue benefits to you? Now you might say, well, one of the consequences is that it accrues fewer benefits to those who aren't in the culture. Yeah, but you can't immediately associate that with race. You can't just do that, say it's white privilege. There's many things it could be. What's going on? Well, we let these pseudo-disciplines into the university because we're stupid and guilty, seriously. And they have no methodological requirements and plenty of power and plenty of time to produce nonsensical research and produce resentful activists, and now we're bearing the fruits of that. It's not pretty. So white privilege. Well, the other thing you might notice is that to attribute to the individuals of a community the attributes of that community on the basis of their racial identity is called racism. That's what racism is. There's no other way of defining it. It's attributing to the individual the characteristics of the group as if the group was homogeneous.
Okay, Mark, did you hear that well?
Absolutely, yes, that was loud and clear.
Okay, great. So I wanted to break down what he said a little bit, because this, I'm sure most of you recognize him. This is Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist, and he's written some, best-selling books, sold millions and millions of books around the world. So he's a very influential figure, particularly on white men, but he's become quite influential on some black men as well. And they would listen to something like this. I've heard them, and I've had to, debate some black people like this who have adopted, his perceptions and worldviews. And, I had to tell them, listen, you let this guy Jedi Mind trick you. So, I broke it down to them this way. So he changes the wording of white privilege to majority, advantage. So he's saying the advantages exist, but he's cleverly changed it to, well, it's just a product of being the majority. Then he talks about to assign white privilege to an individual is racist, because attributing the characteristic of the group to the individual is a racist thing to do. So already he's got you looking at the white individual instead of what he spoke about in the first part, which was the cultural construct. You'll notice he didn't actually go into what exists in that cultural construct that then provides advantages by race. Now, Jordan Peterson knows all of this. So he knew cleverly to turn this around and then say, okay, if you're going to take the traits of the group and assign it to this individual, that's wrong. This is just a guy, a girl, whatever. You can't, blame them or stereotype them by race. That's racism. So he's turned people around and he's got them looking away from the culture. So by getting them to look away from the racial values that are embedded in the culture that create the advantage and disadvantage by race, he's now got you feeling sorry for this white individual who's being treated in a racist manner because they're white and they're being told that they have advantages. So he talked about China, right? So about a month ago, I remember I talked about in China, there's a higher value placed on boys than on girls. And because of that, you have 40 million girls missing from the population. So there's 40 million more boys. But that doesn't mean I'm going to blame the boys. The boys aren't doing anything. The boys aren't abusing girls. They're not orphaning or neglecting these girls or aborting these girls. That's the adults. But the boys are definitely advantaged because of the values that exist in the culture, in communities, and in families. So I absolutely can say boys are advantaged and girls are disadvantaged, to the point that tens of millions of Chinese girls are not alive, who should be alive, if those values didn't exist in culture. Again, Jordan Peterson knows all of this, but notice how he didn't go into any values about race that exist in the culture. He actually turned people away from that. The problem is, if he's talking to white boys and whatever, that's fine. I don't mind. That's none of my business. It's when he's getting into black people, it's particularly black men's heads, and they're taking this and they're now coming to us, trying to convince us of Jordan Peterson's worldview and how correct he is, because now they've accepted him because of his reputation and his best-selling psychologist, and because he could skillfully talk to those people the way he could with no challenge, when it's glaring to anyone, with half a brain, he was really doing a Jedi mind trick on these people. So this is one of the ways they recruit members of our tribe to then serve as an agent for their tribe and try and get us over and convince us of a worldview like what Jordan Peterson has. That these advantages they enjoy in society because they're white and because of the values that exist in culture, trying to get us to act like they don't exist. Because if they can do that, then they can continue to benefit from those advantages and we won't challenge it. And it's members of our own team that are going to be trying to get us to do that. So we really have to be careful about people like this, because this is how bad culture is also finding its way into our culture and causing us to behave in ways in which we are serving as agents for people who are trying to keep us under their control. So he's doing this, serving as an agent for our competitors, convincing us this worldview that is to their advantage, black disadvantage, and it gets us to defer to them, choose to them, be subordinate to them, and give them power over us that we shouldn't have, but some of us are giving them this power by choice. So I've got this checkers and three-dimensional chess image again. I used it about a month ago, because this is what's going on. This is culture side. The real fight is with culture. So we really have to recognize the game that's being played and how this programming, it just sucks our strength for us to really resist this domination the way that we should. So thank you for listening to my presentation today, ladies and gentlemen.
That was really good. Thank you so much, Christopher. Now, we could have a very good conversation. We have a few minutes free over here, and we are open to any and all questions, comments, ideas that you might want to make. So I'm looking for hands to go up. If anyone wants to type into the chat, please go ahead as well. As we wait for some of those to come in, Christopher, I just wanted to share on that Jedi mind trick. I think it baffles me how an African brother or sister could be convinced of that point, especially that, there is some sort of a majority privilege. And I think you don't have to look much further than the reality at home, for an African to think, well, what is the majority privilege in Africa? And think of your own country, where you come from. Is it true? Is it that consistent that the way a white man lives in England is the way a black man lives in the Congo? And you got to ask yourself that, because it's just crazy to me. So be interesting to have your thoughts on that.
So he gets it right in the beginning when he says the people that construct the culture construct it to benefit themselves. So if you're the majority and you construct it, it will work better for you than, let's say, some minority group that comes to live within that culture. So that's generally correct. But then there's a step he should take that he doesn't take, but that I know he knows, because I know of the psychologists who are friends of his and who know him. So if we saw 2 weeks ago when I talked about white supremacy as a cultural niche construct, right? And we can, in a cultural niche, you can have preferences for body type, facial features, hair form, skin color, All of these things can be embedded in culture. And as we know, they are deeply embedded in Western civilization. And this is where the advantage and disadvantage come from, because it's what you would call social norm ethnic stereotyping. Because they have white people having qualities that are positively associated with them and these negative qualities associated with us, this now affects social behavior, social interaction. And it happens really in snap judgments, really, really quickly, which I've showed in some of the prior lectures of how quickly these decisions can be made, sometimes in fractions of a second, because we've been socialized this way, you know, all our lives. This is the part that Jordan Peterson knows that he will not discuss. He leaves it as, oh, it's just majority culture. And then he jumps to defending a white individual now who's being stereotyped as white and being advantaged because he's white. It's racist to say that. No one's saying anything about the individual. Just like the Chinese boy is benefiting because of Chinese culture advantaging him, even though the boy isn't actively doing anything, he is advantaged. And this is exactly how white people are advantaged. So one white woman or one white man, they're not necessarily doing something actively. It's the culture that values them over others, that will associate being educated and civil and nice with white, and associate being unattractive or, you know, aggressive and these other things with black, that now shapes behavior and how the groups interact in very important areas of society. Jordan Peterson knows all of this. So like I said, he can talk to white people all he wants. That's none of my business. But when he's getting into our people now and getting us to internalize that, and then they turn around as agents and try and convince me and you of that. So now we've got, the least we've got is conflict and a lack of cooperation. Because if you look like me, you're on my team. We're all supposed to be working together now to deal with what these other guys over here are doing to us. And here they are, they've turned you around and sent you back as a double agent to come and dismantle my team. So these black guys who are taking his message and bringing it back here, you know, I do have a problem with those people.